Hello, everyone. It's time for another Meta Monday. So let's see what events happened over the weekend and how the meta is looking. My name is Ryan, and I used to be good at Warmachine. Welcome to Spell Rack. We had a fairly robust weekend as far as events are concerned. We had one IG qualifier. We had a Masters event in Poland, and then three other events of reasonable size for Warmachine these days, 12 to 16 players. So first one let's talk about here is the IG qualifier in Connecticut. Hands out to Cody, and a shout out to the Musing Panda podcast and live cast. He was on there last week talking about Infernals. If you want to learn some about Infernals, go check them out. I'll put a link in the notes of the show. But he talked on there about just the winning streak that he has been on and how he's been crushing it. So no surprise to see him taking another event down. Obviously, Infernals data on a global level have been very high, and he's been a big part of that. It really is interesting to see how much of an effect one individual player. As far as the rest of the top 8 here, looking at this, we have a Crix, definitely to be expected. A couple of Orgoths, great to see from a lower level faction. Shadow Flame here, JVM, so that's kind of expected. What I think is really cool is that we have a Dark Operations player here. I love to see Doctor Operations coming back in with all the STLs and the printing that people have been able to do. So that faction's gotten a significant jolt. We've got one other Shadow Flame, and then we've got a Kador. Next event, this is the Polish Masters event. If you watch the Meta Monday video I did the other week, there were 4 major events, and at any of them, none of the events had a Dusk player. So here we actually had a Dusk player bring home a 3-0 victory. Again, this is a Masters after a larger event. We see more Infernals, Signar, Shadow Flame. Here's some Brine Bloods, another Dark Operations player. And then you have the more rare Convergence and Old Men off here. But I guess, considering the top 8 placements and how thin it's been for Dusk, congratulations here for winning one for Dusk. Here we have another event in Illinois. This one was 16 players. Looking at this one quick, really cool to see Kador in a top spot. Obviously, Kador, again, one of the factions that has been struggling a little bit more. So to see them bring home a win is good, albeit these are still, local events. The rest of the breakdown looks pretty familiar. Got a couple of Crix players in here. Orgoth, Umbrey still doing good. Brine Blood's very solid. And then again, kind of to the point last week, where we weren't seeing Dusk players, here's 2 Dusk players. What you might be seeing here is, I'm not going to do a list analysis, but what you might be seeing is something that I had kind of foreshadowed or predicted in one of my earliest videos was, will the Phantasm change the meta? Will the Phantasm with Heleth change the meta? And maybe that's what we're seeing here. Going on to the next list, we have a 16-player event in Ohio. We have Scorn, Old Scorn wing an event. We've talked again about kind of meta reports and the expectation of games you're going to play. Most games out there are being played by the current Mark IV factions. And so you don't completely have to study some of the older stuff, but it's there. These results are certainly showing that. Another good showing from Kador, Gravediggers, Umbrey, of course, Crix, another Kador. Kador actually had a pretty good weekend. And then we have a couple of other legacy factions. Last one I wanted to highlight, this is one of the events just in Southern California. And just take note of the kind of the 3-0s here. Again, we have Brandon Owens taking another event with Gravediggers. He's been having a very excellent record with them. And then we have Old Umbrey here. And so really good to see Umbrey taking down one. Obviously, we all have questions of how powerful they are. I am going to take 1 second to go back and look at a few of those Dusk lists and see if they were running a Heleth Phantasm, because I'm very curious. Azeroth, Heleth, Phantasm. Okay, let's see here. We have Tyrus and then Moraine. No Phantasm to be spoken of. And here's one more. We have Heleth with 2 Phantasms. That is very interesting. So certainly it is maybe making some sort of a mark. Okay, so let's go back and look at maybe the larger meta a little bit. This is the last 3 months. I like to kind of pull the last 3 months as a running look at the meta because things move and evolve and change. There's obviously a lot more Old Umbrey here recently, so it changes stuff. We still have Infernals here at 60%. Obviously, if we're looking at leaders that are off, is at a 64, kind of absolutely bonkers. What's really interesting is the amount of games played here by Old Umbrey, already up at 145 games, and Old Umbrey's at a 60% win rate. For a new faction, you have to wonder, is this players not being experienced playing against Old Umbrey and they don't have an answer in their lists and they're just kind of playing something? The other question you have to ask is, how much experience do the Old Umbrey players have, right? Is this a problem to have a faction that's just getting into people's hands? They don't even have all their models yet, and they're already running a 60% win rate. It's very, very good. Keeping with the Mark IV factions, Necrofactorum, Storm Legion at 54, Brine's at 53, Shadowflame at 53. Pretty good little balance here in the low to mid 50s. These are probably where you kind of want to see the factions. They're not smashing it. Kythos here still at 59%. And as I've talked about before with 63 games played, I feel like Kythos skews this matchup so much that it forces an opponent to have a Kythos list answer, and then it causes problems for a counter list, and that brings up the win percentages of everybody else. Storm Legion, let's actually look at here too. Very funny that Sparkhammer gets some of these, kind of odd additions, but your general pairing here is your Calder and Huxley. Okay, I don't need to go into full detail on all those. Gravediggers at 50%. It looks like Gravediggers has been on an upward trend as people are starting to figure out that faction, so that's good. House Callus at 49%. This one I am going to dive into because here's Haleth at a 55. That's better than she had been doing in the past. And then, kind of the bottom of our trash heap, we have Sea Raiders at 47, Winter Court 46. Now to look at an extremely low amount of games played, this is the last 2 weeks. This is since Labor Day weekend when we had kind of a big weekend. So it takes into account the weekend we've had now, as well as the last weekend. And I wanted to look at this because this is definitely Old Umbrey is in the meta more fully in these. Even if you look at the games played here, Infernals on top with 12 games. Then you have some noise in here, but here's Old Umbrey, 65% win rate, 41 games. It's only 41 games. It's only 2 weeks, but just consider what it means. Umbrey's here at 41. Here's Sea Raiders at 20, Signar at 25, Winter Court 17, Shadowflame at 31, Gravediggers at 30, Necrofactorum 28, and House Callus at 37. So Old Umbrey got more games played than any other Mark IV faction and pulled a 65% win rate. That's really good for a new faction. And so if you're planning on going to an event, you need to study Umbrey. Okay. If you don't have a player in your local meta, you need to try to find some list reviews somewhere. Maybe it's something I can try to break down here soon, but I don't have any experience with them either. That's a high win percentage for a brand new faction. Keep an eye out for them. Certainly a good weekend for a good couple weeks for Sea Raiders here at 59%. And then the rest is kind of everything kind of falls in line. Storm Legion, a little bit above par at 56. Kador had a pretty good weekend. They're here at 53, so they're doing better than they kind of had done in the past. Obviously, Shadowflame at 52. Gravediggers, that 50% is what we saw in the last 3 months. They've been holding okay. Not a great weekend for clicks, so this is a little bit odd. I'm curious if what the maybe the more pattern here looks like. If there's been let's say Kythos here is at 60% win rates. It's not like Kythos is dragging them down because everybody found answers to Kythos. Apparently, we're just seeing some Decathos and Aviserys games that are dragging the faction down. And then here's Callus at 50%. And then Brine's certainly having an off weekend here at 49. So not too much specific data defined. In this weekend, we had enough events to really actually be able to look at it. Obviously, we have enough data to be able to go back 3 months and pull some meaningful statistics out of here. I would say the primary thing that we are learning is Umbrey is very powerful, and we all need to figure out how those lists work. Otherwise, we're just going to get run over at events. Infernals continue to be quite dominant. Kythos continues to be a skew in the meta. You need an answer for Kythos and potentially an off list. For the rest of it, there's a lot of kind of mid 50s armies. And so you do need a well-rounded list. You need to be looking at the meta. But really, I would say if you're going to focus on studying in the next couple of weeks, depending on when your next big event is, I'd be looking at Umbrey. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Talk to you next time.